They praised her for everything: beauty, brains, grace. But no one asked what she wanted. Until it was too late.
When it came to Nora Banks, no one questioned anything. The morning after the jailbreak, the deputies were trying to explain why they had simply let the two known train robbers out of the cell and then locked themselves in that same cell, and watched those same train robbers saunter off to the waiting trio. The answer was quite simple. Nora Banks was the answer, always. Who bakes the best pies? Nora Banks, but she doesn't like to bake much, that's why we so rarely enjoy her offerings. Who sings the prettiest? Nora Banks, but she doesn't like to show off, that's why we almost never hear her songs. Who is the best dancer? Nora Banks, but she'd rather the gentleman dance with the quiet young lady over there, since Nora Banks is also the best at matchmaking. Nora Banks was the youngest child raised by two loving parents, four charming brothers, two sweet sisters, another four notorious brothers, and a solitary shrewish sister, not exactly in that order. Everyone agrees Nora benefited from an education like none other before or since. She learned from her father, Mr. Harold Banks, who was the wealthiest farmer in the county, and her mother, Mrs. Meredith Banks, the schoolteacher, before she was wooed by Harold Banks. Nora absorbed everything taught to her with a healthy appetite, if a somewhat scattered attention span. She learned to sew from Adelaide, the eldest sister. She learned to keep books from her eldest brother, Harold, Jr., who managed the bank until he was elected mayor of the town the year Nora turned 13. Nora took to numbers like none before her, as Mayor Banks told it. Those looking for help in selecting the finest horse to buy would go to Gilbert Banks and his stables, but the true intent was to find Nora, since Gilbert proclaimed she was a natural with horses. And so it went. Each skill Nora's siblings excelled at was something that came quite naturally, and her legend grew. Of course, she also had four brothers who had chosen to live on the other side of the law. Who could never be beat in a game of poker? Nora Banks, but she hated to see people lose, so she would often fold in order to give them a chance to keep their money. Who was the fastest draw? Nora Banks, but of course, she never had to prove that. Who could drink anyone under the table? Nora Banks could, if she chose to, but she is a lady, after all. Nora Banks did none of these things for a profession. She was a ladies' traveling companion, always setting off to see the world with rich young girls or tired old women who wanted to see their great niece sweating. If Nora Banks had hoped that leaving town would allow for her legend to tire itself out, it would have been the first time in recorded history that she was wrong. It seemed odd to so many of the townsfolk that Nora Banks stayed in town less frequently each time she visited. She was quite beloved. It seemed that as soon as someone asked Nora Banks why she didn't stay, another legendary Nora Banks question was answered: who could leave town the fastest? Why, Nora Banks could. And her legend slowly turned on her: who was the snobbiest? Nora Banks. She doesn't even visit town long enough to kick the dirt from her feet on her way out of there. Who was the most spoiled? Nora Banks. After all, her parents just let her run wild and never truly taught her manners. Who was the most condescending? Nora Banks. Just listen when she explains how to complete a simple task. Nora Banks walked from the train station one fine Tuesday evening, tired from her long journey to and from New Orleans, accompanying Widow Langstrom to Niece's wedding. She had visited the hotel she sought before on previous journeys similar to this. Tonight she would rent one of the rooms let out by Mrs. Best, a respectable hotel manager she had befriended some time ago. In the morning, she would take the first stagecoach home to Green Oak. After signing in at the front desk and chatting quietly with Mrs. Best, Nora finally took her small suitcase up to her room for the night. As Nora ascended the stairs, she passed a happy young couple she did not recognize, but they certainly recognized her.
Why, Nora Banks, you sly old dear, you.
The young lady called out, a smirk on her face and a hand on her hip. Nora turned, politely and greeted them, still not recognizing their faces or names. After a brief conversation regarding where she had been,
Living it up this time.
she excused herself and continued on to her room, tired from the journey. That was when she heard the young woman chirp to her husband as she continued down the stairs.
There goes the legendary Nora Banks. She thinks she's too good for her own town, but the sad truth is she's too poor to live anywhere else.
The legendary Nora Banks went to her room in the hotel. The legendary Nora Banks removed her hat, gloves, and jacket. The legendary Nora Banks sat on the bed. The legendary Nora Banks felt numb as the first tear crept from her eye and shimmied down her cheek to drop suddenly on her hand. There was a hoot and laughter from the street outside. Nora looked out the window and saw the saloon across the way lit up and lively and luring her to lose a little legend. She gave it no more than a thought, retrieved her jacket, hat, and gloves and left the cold empty room behind her. She crossed the way and entered the smoky room. She saw no recognition in any face, only a room filled with men of ill repute and the women who were reputedly ill-behaved. She smiled and relaxed on her way to the bar to order a glass of port. She saw a few tables towards the back of the large room hosting games of cards and brought her drink there as she waited for an opening to join. It didn't take long before there was an invitation at the table with a large sweaty man in a pink lace-collared shirt, a dusty cowboy with a consistently inconsistent cough, and a sleek man with a hard stare and a woman with fair skin and deep red lips at his side. Nora couldn't tell if the lady was playing or not, but it was very clear she was the one inviting Nora to their table. Introductions were made. The large sweaty man in the pink lace-collared shirt was Ace Harriday, a traveling businessman on his way home to Charleston. The dusty cowboy coughed out that his name was, in fact, Dusty. The sleek man introduced himself and the lady as Jack Johnson and his beloved wife Livonia. Nora gave her name as Miss Banks, taking the seat between Ace and Dusty.
Banks? You're not one of those Banks from Green Oak, are you?
Ace asked, mopping his brow uselessly.
I am from Green Oak.
Nora responded politely, watching as Livonia shuffled the cards. Years ago, Calvin Banks had taught Nora to play cards. There was a legend about that, too, she knew.
I've heard of some of them Banks.
Ace went on, leaning back in his chair and waving his hands at his face, airing his aggressive cologne for the table to inhale. Dusty coughed and drank from his beer.
Some ain't so bad, but some are much more fun.
Ace laughed at his own claim. Jack raised an eyebrow at him, and Nora saw Ace blanch and sit forward, flustered.
I didn't mean no harm, Miss Banks.
He managed to say with a smile.
Which Banks do you call your own? The farm, the bank, the stable, the...
Antioch.
Jack interrupted. He looked to Nora as Livonia dealt silently.
I knew a few boys named Banks.
Jack offered as Livonia finished dealing.
Harlan, Elroy, Calvin, and Rupert Banks. I recall working with them on a job or two. I cannot remember if they were from Green Oak, but I do believe they are from the same family branch.
Yes, sir.
Nora nodded.
They are brothers, and they are from Green Oak. They are not exactly the first Banks boys discussed in certain company, but they do have a reputation of their own making.
Livonia finished the deal and tapped the deck once to indicate as much. Nora looked up at the tap.
Mrs. Johnson doesn't talk much.
Ace said in a half sneer. Clearly, it was an issue he had already attempted to discuss and been flatly denied. Jack spoke for his wife.
Jack of Hearts High.
He said.
Your bet, cowboy.
Those Banks boys, they uncles of yours?
Dusty barked unintentionally, looking at the down card in his hand as he attempted to hold back a cough.
No, sir.
Nora replied. She let the silence creep over the game as she studied her down card carefully. Dusty coughed before managing to croak out his bet.
Wasn't the oldest Banks boy a mayor?
Ace asked, matching Dusty's bet.
Yes, the youngest elected mayor to date.
Nora admitted, quite proud of her brother.
Checked.
Coughed Dusty. All followed his lead, wanting to see the next deal and how it would develop. Livonia dealt the next round.
Is that mayor your daddy?
Ace asked, watching her carefully. Nora sipped from her drink, pretending Dusty's coughing fit covered the question.
50.
He said. Livonia shook her head and placed her cards on the table and waggling her fingers to the right, sighing slightly. Jack smiled at her.
It would seem my wife is out.
Nora and Ace both met the bet as Dusty studied the cards on the table. Finally, he threw down his hand and managed to stave off another cough.
It ain't worth it.
He said.
I'm out.
He took another drink of his beer and drummed his fingers on the table, suddenly bored. Coughing quietly, his eyes settled on Nora.
I heard about one of the Banks girls. She's supposed to be something else.
Another coughing fit seized him fiercely.
I heard of this daughter.
Jack smiled wryly.
She can outdraw anyone who challenges her, outdrink any drunk, outplay any gambler.
Legendary.
Nora sighed.
The legendary Nora Banks.
That's her.
Livonia smiled. Jack nodded in agreement.
The one and only.
He murmured. Nora's cheeks burned in her shame. She looked at the cards in front of her.
Let's make it interesting.
Ace grinned, his face shining with sweat.
I'll go your 50 and then 50 more. Mr. Johnson, I'll see your bet and raise you 100.
Ace said, still holding his slick grin.
100 more to you, Johnson.
Jack showed no emotion. He put in his 100 and looked to Nora.
Jack showed no emotion. He put in his 100 and looked to Nora.
Your bet, Miss Banks.
I'll see the 100.
Nora replied, quickly calculating her New Orleans winnings.
And go 100 more.
Dusty let out a puff of air.
You bet like that legendary Banks girl.
He chuckled. Ace nodded and agreed.
I've grown up in that shadow.
Nora said tightly.
I've always heard about the generous, the kind-hearted, the sharp-witted, the talented and magnificent Nora Banks. But I've never met her.
No.
Ace asked.
The only Nora Banks I ever knew.
Nora ground out, staring intently at her cards.
Was a girl who got bored hemming a skirt like her big sister Addie, so she avoided needles. Then Addie just crowed and crowed about that one hem, and suddenly Nora was a born seamstress. Hiding from Addie, Nora would sit on the floor where Harold would mutter numbers at himself in a sing-song voice, and Nora just repeated the song one night at supper. Suddenly, everyone in town talked of Nora's incredible aptitude for counting. Didn't matter what Nora did or didn't do, she was suddenly told she could do it all. She can't escape tales of her achievements, not even when she has 2 left feet, cannot sing without breaking glass, and she never drew a gun in her life.
Nora stopped, suddenly aware of the volume of her own voice. Ace's mouth was agape in awe at her outburst. Jack stared with a dead stare while Livonia's mouth curved slightly into a knowing smile. Dusty had even stopped coughing.
Sounds like your wine might have been made with grapes a touch sour, my dear.
Ace chuckled.
100 to you.
Nora managed to bet in a quieter voice. Ace hedged. He looked at the cards on the table and then at the cards in his hands. Fear flashed in his eyes briefly before he recovered.
I can't do it.
He folded his hand and laid it on the table before reaching for his handkerchief and mopped his face again.
Up to you to keep her honest, Mr. Johnson.
He laughed. Jack didn't look at the table. He didn't look at his cards. He kept his eyes on Nora with a stare that was colder than ice in February. Nora looked up at him and felt her blood chill in her veins as she met his stare. Without warning, he suddenly broke the spell and smiled. With a shrug, he threw his cards on the table.
It's yours.
Jack said.
Last.
Dusty cried out, causing other patrons to stop their own business and look to their table. Nora looked up and saw the Green Oak couple from the hotel over by the bar. She looked away and saw Livonia watching her. Nora's focus was shattered now that she had seen the hotel couple. She showed her winning hand and hoped she could now leave quietly without drawing attention.
Well, now.
Ace grinned.
Glad I dropped when I did.
Pardon me. I fear the train tired me out more than I believed.
Nora pushed her seat from the table.
If you will all kindly excuse me, I will retire. Thank you for the game.
My dear lady, don't be in such a hurry.
Ace chided.
After winning so much of our hard-earned coin from us, we would appreciate the chance to win some of it back.
Nora shook her head to clear it, having already forgotten she had one. She collected only some of the winnings, leaving the rest where it was.
That won't be an issue.
She murmured and waved at the pile still on the table.
Drinks on me. Unless you simply want to take what's yours, then do so and have a pleasant evening.
She turned and made her way to the door, hearing Ace tell someone they could take the seat of the finest young card player he'd seen. She recognized the chirp of the woman exclaim in response.
Well, of course.
Her voice brittle and biting.
Didn't you know not to play the legendary Nora Banks?
Nora got to the door before Jack and Livonia stopped her.
Please don't rush off.
Jack implored.
Allow us to escort you to your destination.
Nora looked at them both nervously.
Please.
Livonia added, placing her hand gently on Nora's arm. Nora nodded anxiously. Her tension eased slightly as they stepped into the cool night air.
Allow us to properly introduce ourselves.
Jack said.
I am better known by some as Dead-Eye Jack, and my wife here is Seven-Word Libby. We are legends ourselves.
Jack smiled wickedly. She did know who they were. Rupert and Calvin had written stories of their dealings with this duo and how proud they were to be known associates.
We couldn't help but notice you seem a bit upset by your legendary status.
Jack began, leading Nora away from the hotel and the saloon.
As friends of your brothers, we feel it is our duty to assist you in your time of need.
Oh, thank you, but I am in no time of need.
Nora tried.
Also, the hotel is in that direction.
Many times, when a legend is applied to one,
Jack drawled invitingly.
it is not by choice. A legend is a hard thing to live up to.
You can say that again.
Nora sighed.
I never asked to be this.
But once you find yourself a legend so powerful it overcomes even you.
Jack slowed his walk to a stop. He smiled at the dimly lit building.
There is really only one thing to do.
And that is?
Nora sighed, looking wistfully at the hotel behind her. When neither Jack nor Livy answered, she finally faced the building they eyed. It was the county jail.
You embrace your legend.
Livy smiled in the moonlight.
Inside the jail, Harlan and Elroy Banks await judgment or freedom.
Jack explained casually, releasing Nora's arm while his shoulders relaxed and his wife's hand rested in the crook of his elbow.
I could continue with my original plan and attempt a jailbreak, or
Nora's voice trailed off as Jack's head, hoping he would finish his thought. Instead, he turned and led Livy to the doorway of the darkened storefront nearest them. Nora looked down and found a pearl-handled revolver in her hands. Somehow Livy or Jack must have placed it there when she had been distracted. She looked back up at the jail. They were her brothers, after all. She couldn't break her mother's heart by just letting them rot there until judgment called. She looked back to Jack and Livy and understood. She smiled a slow, wicked smile she'd never smiled before. She knew in her heart there would be no questions once she introduced herself.
I am the legendary Nora Banks.
She whispered. When it came to Nora Banks, no one questioned anything.